Hello, and welcome to the Oshkosh, the People's Podcast. I'm your host, Timber Smith. Oshkosh listeners, how are we doing out there? The Oshkosh is a podcast that spotlights people who've had an association with the Oshkosh or the surrounding Fox Cities region. Ooh, I hope everybody is doing good out there. It is a new year. We are trying to get in place with all of these new energies, new goals. I'll tell you what's not new weather. It is Wisconsin. It is cold. It's just the facts. All right. I don't know if y'all know this, but I have an agreement with God about weather, and it is this. You know what I don't like? I don't like people who complain all year long about weather. You know, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair to the universe. So my agreement is I complain the cold half, and I will suck it up for the warm half. The warm half I can get down with. I can do that. I don't care if it's melting skin off. We can figure that out. We can work that out as far as I'm concerned. I know some people are like, well, you can only take so many clothes off. I'll live with it. But the cold... Me and cold, we ain't friends. We ain't cool like that. We're not cousins. I've known it my whole life. I'm born and raised Wisconsin, but look, we ain't friends like that. So, you know, I am tolerant of cold. So, all right, Oshkosh listeners, it is good to be back in the seat. I've been kind of recording sporadically right now, so I don't have a set schedule. I'm relying on the fact that we have a whole lot of episodes for you Oshkosh listeners to go and check out. And since the average episode is about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, I figured that's enough content out there for y'all to feast on until we get a chance to get new, interesting individuals into the seat. And right now, guess what I got? I got a new and interesting person sitting in the seat. So, you know, Oshkosh listeners, you know. I think you know what's coming. I don't know how I continue to get these amazing, amazing guests. And this week is no different. So, without any further ado, this week's guest is Greg Wright. What's good, Greg?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm glad you are here. How are we doing this morning?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Yeah. I am not one of those people who complains about the cold. I love the cold. I'm strange that way, but I do complain when there's no snow. But I do love the winter.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm a winter boy.
How do you feel about summer, though?
Oh, I love summer, too.
Okay.
I love all 4 seasons. I love change. So I love the cycle of the year. I lived a year in California, and winter didn't come, and my body overheated, and I was like, yeah, I'm a 4 seasons guy.
Okay.
I need my cold stretch.
I hear that from people. I think people think you want to go somewhere like a Cali, but I hear often, you need the seasons. You kind of need to go through that whole cycle of change.
For me, that's definitely true. I appreciate that it's not true for everybody, but for me, I just love the routine of the year and kind of having these phases where, you know, this is such a good hibernation time. It's such a good thinking time. So I do love that time of the year. It is.
You've got to be very you go out with intent.
Yes.
In summer, I might just go.
Yeah, well, and that's everyone always, people who aren't from cold weather climates are always like, well, you can't do anything. You're stuck in your house all the day. And I'm like, no, that's not true. You just have to dress for it.
Yeah.
You have to know how to wear the right clothes to be able to do what you're trying to do. But you can still get out and do a lot in the winter.
You know what? I don't think they can appreciate a really good flannel.
Exactly.
Seriously, a really good flannel is just such a vibe and such a feel. Mm-hmm. A good flannel feels good.
My cousin and I love to talk about your internal furnace kicking in when you're outside and you're doing something active, and just how crazy it feels to know it's 10 degrees outside and you're sweating. And I think that's the piece that people, when you're bundled up and you've been doing something active outside and your body is working well enough to keep you warm, and you're actually overheating, even though it's freezing cold outside. I find that sort of fascinating.
All right. Well, you know what, Greg? Let's get ready to jump in. Can you please share a little something about yourself and your association with the Oshkosh and the surrounding Fox Cities region?
Sure. So, Greg Wright, I run a company called Spark Towns. I do consulting work with communities that helps with placemaking, helps communities with public art, with helping the community feel more creative, and helps with entrepreneurship support. I'm a strong believer in local economies and trying to get communities positioned to help support local businesses and local ownership. And so got connected with Discover Oshkosh and have been doing some work here. So my main association with the Kosh is that I'm doing work right now with the Oshkosh area, specifically through Discover Oshkosh, but I also live in Princeton, Wisconsin. And while Princeton is not officially part of the Oshkosh area, we're about 45 minutes away, and it is the Target we go to. So it is a small town. We're 1,200 people. We're sort of in the Green Lake area, and the closest city for us to go and have, our city experiences is Oshkosh. So we do get here. I got here more and more often. I am originally from Stevens Point. So Stevens Point in central Wisconsin is more my stomping grounds. But since I've been living in Princeton, I've been spending more time in the Fox Valley.
So are you trying to tell me like that the Kosh is somebody's big city?
It is. I mean, I've spent some time in Chicago, Minneapolis, and San Francisco before moving back to Wisconsin. So it is funny to me to have Oshkosh be the big city I'm going to as well. When I was living in Stevens Point, I always said if I left again, I would go someplace bigger. And I ended up in a town of 1,200 people. So life sometimes throws you some curveballs, but 1,200 people has been really fun. So unexpectedly fun. So, and it is kind of cool to live in a place where, and we don't have fast food restaurants. We don't have a Target. We like your life is just different. You have to talk about planning for being in the winter. You have to plan your life to know, to make sure you have the supplies you need. You need a hammer. You're going to drive 45 minutes to get it. So,
ooh, good Lord.
So you have to make sure you have your supplies for the week you need before you get started. It's different, but it's cool.
All right. I got a question. All right. You used one of these words that I've heard, and it's one of these words that I think get floated a lot right now, but I question if a lot of people know what it means, and that's placemaking.
Sure.
Let's talk about that. What does that mean? Yeah,
so placemaking is a relatively new field. It really focuses on the concept of a sense of place in a community. There are a lot of varieties of placemaking. The type I do is frequently referred to as creative placemaking, which is the use of art and other cultural amenities to try to strengthen a sense of place. But there's natural placemaking and other types of placemaking. You can think about the natural environment. I think one of the interesting things about where the world is at right now is that the digital age has really changed how we view place. You can live in one community and work in a completely different one. My sister lives in Stevens Point, but she works for a company that's based out of San Francisco. She obviously is not commuting there back and forth every day. And people can go to college without ever stepping foot on a campus. There's so much ability now in this digital age, I think especially after COVID, for people to live their lives in multiple places at the same time. And so what that's mean for communities is that if you're not thinking about the sense of place people feel, you're probably losing people. People want to live in places that are thriving and vibrant. They want to feel a connection to where they live. They want to feel like that place is enriching their day-to-day experience. And so a sense of place in some ways has become even more important because we don't really need it. We now can choose it. And in choosing it, we have a lot more intention around what we're trying to experience. And so communities that are understanding, that are finding ways to invest in community spaces, third spaces, art spaces, other things like that really bring people together, fight against the isolation so many of us feel. And if they're doing that work, they're seeing really great benefits, not just in economic benefits in the community, but in wellness benefits and a sense of community and, the ability for people to talk and communicate. So it's really cool work. It's sort of using art, in my experience, to try to leverage some sort of culture change that's positive for a community.
First, I want to send a big shout out to Amy Albright for introducing us to.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She is fantastic. And I don't know if you've ever seen Amy walk in a space, but she literally knows everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's
like 90% of the room.
She's a placemaking investment all on her own, right? She so loves people and she's so good at connecting with people.
Yes.
That as soon as she's in the room, people are connecting to each other.
Oh, so yeah.
She's an incredible asset to this community.
Oh, yeah. Sure. And highly beloved. Highly beloved. So you were called for a reason. What are we missing? What's missing in the Kosh? Why were you contacted and saying, because to me, if we contact someone like you, we're saying, there's a little work to do. That's what's up, right? That's how I feel about it. Like, because we typically we don't do change easy here in the Kosh.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a bit. So I should give a shout out to Drew Muskie because he's actually the first person I connected with. He had come to my partner runs a restaurant in Princeton, and he had come to one of our live music shows, and we kind of met through that. And then some other common friends connected us because he was interested in doing more public art in Oshkosh, and said, they had done some convenings and they had some meetings, but stuff hadn't really moved forward. And so a friend of ours connected us so that I could help him think through some strategies to help get this work to take root more in Oshkosh. And then he connected me to Amy, and then Amy hired me to do some strategic planning for the community. I think most communities are in a similar spot to Oshkosh right now, that people are starting to understand that this work can be really valuable. There obviously are communities that are way farther along in that journey who have really strong public art investments and have been thinking about public spaces and third places and other investments. But a lot of communities aren't, or if they are, it's some random person in the community decided to put a mural up here or invest in a sculpture somewhere. The infrastructure to support that is usually pretty lacking in communities, unless you're living in a bigger city that has the budget to hire a public art commission or a public art person. And so thinking about ways to do this in smaller towns, that is a lot of what I do, is I help communities figure out how to create the infrastructure to do that. So Oshkosh, in some ways is there's some cool projects happening. There is a lot of art in this town already. There are some cool spaces in this community, but I don't think there's a full strategy fleshed out. And again, what I was talking about earlier is this work happens best when you're also thinking about what cultures you're trying to change, right? What cultures you're trying to push. And so even more fun than finding the art projects we're going to invest in at some point, for me, is what I've been doing for the last couple of months, which is sitting down with as many community members as I can and just getting a sense of what people want to see the culture shift in, which directions that should shift in, where those opportunities are, so that when we are making those art investments, we're doing them intentionally to draw people to a specific location or create awareness about something in the community that people don't know about, or as we've talked about, like changing the face of Oshkosh so people understand who's here now. The people here now are not the same people that were here 100 years ago, and that celebrating the diversity that's growing in a community like this, that's something we can do through art, right? So there are all these opportunities that come in first understanding where people want to see culture shifts happen, and then from that we can start to think about what art investments we make to drive that shift.
I got this opportunity to sit down with you and do one of these interviews.
Yeah.
And I appreciated it, just to be able to share, just the fact that my name was out there as someone to have the conversation with, right? Without giving too much away, because I know we're going to come back and talk about this later.
Yeah.
What's the most interesting, or some of the most interesting things that you've taken away from the interviews?
I think one of the things that's really interesting to me about Oshkosh, probably the most interesting and repeated comment I heard from people, is people do love this place. They also feel like it undersells itself. That the phrase is that there's like a culture of mediocrity at times here, and that people get afraid of doing anything ambitious here. And what's interesting is when I hear that comment as regularly as I've heard it, it means that it isn't actually the culture here, that there's something getting in the way of people being as ambitious as they want to be. And so that's the fun of trying to figure out what projects we can do, is if enough people in the community feel like they want something different than what their day-to-day experience is, the culture exists already to change. It just is trying to figure out how to bring those people together in a way and start to find some projects that shift that energy to have what people are already talking about and feeling become the new reality, right? And so I think it's, Stephen's Point and Oshkosh have a lot of similarities to them. I think, these communities that were historically, mill communities, very blue collar working class communities, a lot of that sense that you could ask for more, it just wasn't something we did. I think that also relates to the strong immigrant populations that settled in these communities. You felt you were taught to feel grateful for what you had, and asking for more than that was just something we didn't do, right? And so trying to figure out how to take what is in a lot of ways a very honorable culture, in that, that humbleness and that desire to make the best out of the life you have, but also teach people it's okay to want something nice. It's okay to celebrate. It's okay to ask for something more luxurious or whatever it is, to put something beautiful in the middle of your community like that. That's also good. And there are ways to do that where that beauty can also celebrate the culture you're proud of. And so to me, that's what we're looking for in these projects are investments that are going to both fit the history and culture of this community in its best form, but also stretch it in ways that say but we can keep growing and we can be something even bigger in the future. And it's okay to be bold. And, I'll probably say this a couple times on the episode, but I get excited about Oshkosh because I think Oshkosh has the best bones of all the Fox Valley communities for this type of work. It is, people are loving a more high density urban lifestyle again. Oshkosh has these pockets of density all over the community. There are these little neighborhoods. I learned about the Highholder neighborhood where the Thunderbird Cafe is, right? This little pocket in the middle of a neighborhood that has potential to be something really, really good in its service to that neighborhood, and offering, restaurants and shops and other things along those lines. Oshkosh has that all over the place. And so in that way, these types of investments really should take root here and be easier here than in a community that has to either build a downtown or build a new commercial area to be able to do that type of work. So it just is about seeing those opportunities and investing in those opportunities and shifting the mindset of Oshkosh in that process.
Facts. If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, what would you like to be doing?
So that's always a big question because I love change. As I said before, that's part of why I'm a Four Seasons guy. So I usually have about a 7-year itch before I need to be doing something different. And I started my career as an English teacher, so I've been all over the place in terms of stuff I've done. I love writing. That's the someday in my life I did take a little stretch of life between working in nonprofits and teaching where I did some writing, but I would love to get back into that at some point. I just think there's something really personal about sitting with your own words and then finding the right versions of them to share with people. And every time I've gotten the chance to do that, I've really enjoyed that process. So someday I will do some writing again and, get back in that saddle.
Oh, that's fire. I wish I could write. I didn't know you were an English teacher.
I was, yeah. I taught high school English in a suburb of the Twin Cities in Burnsville, Minnesota.
How was that?
And then I taught in Chicago. Both of them were great. The high school I taught in Burnsville had a really significant immigrant and refugee population. There were 53 different languages spoken at home. And then I taught at one of the very few balanced diversity high schools in Chicago. Chicago's an interesting school district because almost every school is 90% one race. People don't know that. They think it's a diverse city because the city on the whole is diverse, but it's an incredibly segregated city. So the schools end up being, for the most part, Hispanic, Black, or white. And so I worked at one of the schools that had a pretty balanced diversity. And so got in both of those school environments to really think about some of the diversity conversations we talked about, or we will probably talk about at some point in this conversation, I'm assuming, given the conversations we've had before, which has really informed a lot of the placemaking work I've done too. I think everyone should teach for at least a couple of years because it's such a great way to understand who is in our world. And it is such great training for working hard because you have to be ready every day to do the job. Because if you're not, the kids will eat you alive. So it's just such you learn to work hard, you learn to get your stuff done, you learn to manage. You're teaching a bunch of different classes, and then in the passing period, which will last for 4 minutes, a random kid will walk up to you and drop some bomb on you about their personal life, and you're like, I have to do this in the middle of also correcting papers and planning for a class and having the speaker come, and it's just it's all this stuff coming at you like wildfire all the time, and you learn how to be really effective and efficient.
I've never heard. I have a similar philosophy, but it's about the military.
Yeah.
I think everybody should have to serve 2 years in the military because then it gives us this common experience that we can all reference to.
Yeah. And
also, as you get to meet people not like you, because the military, they throw you all together and give you the same mission. You're going to have to figure it out. There's sergeants that will make sure that you figure it out, right? So I like this idea also, if everybody had to do a couple of years of teaching, I think that would be really interesting. And I've never been a teacher, but I've got to work in school environments, and you learn a lot from kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like the stuff you learn from them. First of all, being around young people keep you young, and I think we all could use a dose of that.
Yeah.
But even more importantly, like the stuff that they bring to you, like you start thinking about it, and like they're thoughtful, they're smart.
Yeah. There is not a kid who doesn't have something to teach you, right? That's the thing about it. It's just, and one of my commitments I made when I was teaching was that every kid was somebody I just needed to figure out. Like if a kid wasn't doing well in my class, if they weren't behaving well, if they weren't getting their homework done, it wasn't because of something that was wrong with them. It was because of something I had not done yet to figure out what they needed. And not that I was effective at that at all times, and not that there were kids who didn't get under my skin, whatever. But it just like I was like, this everybody wants to be successful, right? Like there's nobody who doesn't. So, and it helped me. My mom was a special ed teacher, so I grew up in a house where I was taught to appreciate that sometimes students just need a different path to be successful. But that's the attitude I tried to take into teaching, and it was fascinating how many students. I mean, I loved a student who I would be told I was going to hate. Those are always my favorite. Like, oh, this kid's a troublemaker. This kid's too much. Like that was the kid. By the end of the year, I'd want them. Like I would want another teacher who had them the year before to be like, "What did you do?" Because it was just like fun to try to figure out what was going on enough with them to be able to give them a new set of tools to be successful,
to earn trust.
Yeah, and I just think that is, that is an opportunity you get as a teacher that I don't think you get in almost any other profession, is the challenge of actually getting to know people and figure out who they are at such a diverse level. Because I mean, you're teaching 150 kids at a time, right?
Oh yeah.
Like it's I mean, when I was teaching in Chicago, I was very lucky to teach at this selective enrollment school that was a public school that kids tested to get into. So they were all really motivated kids, but they came from more than 100 different elementary schools all over the city of Chicago. So I had kids who were homeless, and I had kids who were billionaires' kids, and they were in the same English class. And you're like trying to figure out what do you all need to learn in this environment when you're coming from such different places, right?
Wow, yeah.
One of my students hosted the Dalai Lama when he was in Chicago. Like he stayed at her house while he was in town.
Bruh.
And then another student, literally we were trying to figure out how to have him find housing because both of his parents had died and he didn't get along with his aunt he was living with, and she kicked him out. And so you have you have this such disparity, in who was walking through my room, but also such opportunity to be like, well, this is America, right? Like this is what we're talking about. And, and so, and what I love about writing teaching is it has to be different for each kid because you're trying to teach them to have their own voice in their writing.
Well, you got to meet them where they're at. Yeah. That's hard.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I mean, because of the broad swath.
Yeah, it is. And that's, I mean, I will say that's part of why I eventually got out of it was just recognizing I didn't think I could do it at the level it required for 40 years, right? I was either going to have to compromise how I taught or I was going to burn myself out. But I did it for 8 years and I loved every minute of it. I'm not, a lot of people that leave teaching because they're frustrated or angry, and that is not my experience. I loved it. I just knew that it was something I couldn't love forever. And I wanted to see what else was out. I mean, especially you're helping these kids grow into these really cool opportunities. I was like, well, what opportunities am I ready for now, that I hadn't been ready for before? And so
how long have you been out of it now?
My last group of kids I taught was in 2011. So it's been 13 years. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to accidentally or intentionally communicate with any of them?
Yeah, I don't talk to a lot of students anymore. I mean, especially now that it's been 13 years, there's still a handful. I mean, social media changes things, right?
Yes,
I still follow a bunch of students and stuff. It is really rare for me to still interact with them. But one of my points of pride that still happens with more frequency than I'd expect being 13 years out is I taught this AP Lang and Comp class, AP English writing class. And before the test, I would give each kid a poker chip, because I had this really incredible professor in my education program that talked about how a good teacher gives kids poker chips because you're much more willing to gamble if you've got a big pile of chips. And if you only have a couple of chips to play with, you don't gamble. And gambling is where students learn, right? So I told them that metaphor that my teacher gave me, and then before they went into this test, I gave them each a poker chip. And I get like some kid will find it in their desk, like some kid. They're like 35-year-olds with kids now themselves, right? Like some adult now will find that in their desk when they're moving or shifting, and I'll get a message, I still have my poker chip. And it's just, it's like
so awesome,
crazy. And that is like, that is part of like, for people who, I know education can get a bad name these days, but like the role you're playing, like, especially when you're teaching high school, like their brains form like during that stretch of time. Right. And it's crazy. You think about, I was 22 when I first started teaching, right? Like in the power you're given, the responsibility you're given, and having the ability to play a role in shaping what will become a formed brain, where they will, 13 years later, reach out to you with a message on Instagram because they found something that's, that you kind of gave to them in a day when you're trying to figure out what to do before they took a test, right? Like, and that had meaning for them in a way that stuck with them for a good stretch of their lives.
Yes. The reason I asked that is because I've had instances like, and my biggest impact was in higher ed. And, working with all these students that I got to work with for the decade that I was in higher ed. And, now they've moved on, they graduated, the master's degrees, some PhDs and all of this stuff. And then sometimes I end up communicating with them, whether I run into them or they reach out to me, and they remember these conversations that I had, and they took away some nugget from this conversation that altered like the way that their trajectory in life, or how they were going to go about chasing their dreams or whatever it was. Right. And I don't remember it. I'm just thinking like we were chopping it up and I was trying to put you on game and stuff like that. But sometimes there's real impact, real important impact that helps them grow into that productive, loving, empathetic individual out here, making this space a better place. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really understand the power in education and the need for having really good individuals in it to be able to create those impacts.
Yeah. And again, like the responsibility I think you have in that role, there was a woman in woman teacher that I worked with in Chicago who was in charge of our GSA program, our Gay Straight Alliance program, who did an in-service with our teachers at one point where she talked about our responsibility to help students grow into the best version of the self they chose for themselves. And that stuck with me in this really powerful way, that like the challenge of teaching is not to shape kids in your own image. The challenge of teaching is to help kids start to see the image that they want to grow into. And, and having enough flexibility in the way you show up with these students. And, no way did I do that right with every kid, right? You had the students that just, you couldn't see correctly, or you couldn't resonate with in the right way. But when I did it right, that's what I did well, was helping students see a version of themselves that they wanted to see, and giving enough shape to it that they could start growing into that person, and giving them the tools then to be able to question for themselves whether or not that was the right choices that they wanted to make. And I think that, again, we talk about reading scores and math scores. Like that's part of, I get annoyed at times with the way we measure and talk about schools. Like I get it's easy to measure reading and math scores, and we need to measure and have accountability in schools. I agree with that. But like the real work that gets done is so hard to measure, and it takes time and it takes resources, but it's really cool when it works. And I will always feel better for having had that experience.
Facts. That is just facts.
Well, and it's fun. It's just fun to I haven't lived in that version of myself for a while. Mr. Wright has been gone for 13 years now. So it's fun to that was a fun little time travel.
All right. Well, Greg, you ready to jump in?
Yeah.
All right. So first segment. The first segment is called What in the World is Going On With? That's where you start with the phrase, what in the world? And then you tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff on my mind right now, but what in the world is going on with our incapacity to love each other? I have struggled with that a lot lately. I have I wrote an essay a long time ago when I was doing some writing about how I just feel like we need to love harder. And I feel like one of the problems I have with the American like perspective on love is that we talk about romantic love all the time and we kind of limit it in that way, but we don't talk about like love as a foreign policy or love as an immigration policy or love as an educational policy, right? Like almost all of our faith traditions get us to a place where like love is the ultimate thing, right? And we are not taking the time to like sit with that. Loving is hard work, right? I mean, I'm in a relationship right now. It is hard work. It is not easy. You're married with kids. Like, love is not always easy. It is not always, it's not always just like, buying roses and going out for dinner, right?
Facts.
The real love is in a lot of times hard work and discipline and other accountability. And I just don't feel like we're there right now. My brother's running for state office. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention on this podcast or not, but he's running for. Running for the state superintendent right now. Jeff Wright, check him out. And we've been talking a lot about how like Wisconsin actually is purple, and purple is a color, right? Like it isn't like there are blue people and red people in this state. There are a lot of people who are purple. Like most people want their schools to be doing well. Most people also want to stay fiscally responsible. Like it's not like we're two completely different groups of humans living in two completely different societies here, but that's what we've been told. And to me, a lot of that just is in this loving space. Like we don't know how to love each other anymore. We don't know how to like show up in love in a community and say, how do we, as people who want different things, sit down and try to come up with an answer that meets as many of those different things as possible. And so that's what's on my mind.
It just feels like we've lost the ability to not have to be one team or the other.
Yeah.
Like, cause that's not, that don't work. That works for sports.
Yeah. I mean, like I swear, I mean, this is me being a political nut, but we used to not talk about states as red states and blue states. That started happening when George W. Bush got elected by Tim Russert, Meet the Press. Like he was the first person to use the red state, blue state analogy. And I think, especially as a placemaker, it started to attach our political beliefs to where we live. And anything that's attached to where we live is very connected to our identity, right? We are Packers fans in Wisconsin, right? Like not everyone, I know that there are people who aren't, but if they aren't, it's almost likely because they grew up or spent time somewhere else. Or had a family member that was really important to their life who grew up or spent time somewhere else, right?
Yes.
Like that is a place-based, I mean, this will freak a lot of Wisconsin people out, but if you like did not grow up in Wisconsin, if you grew up in Seattle, you'd probably be a Seahawks fan, right? Like, it's not in your blood as much as it is in the dirt you live in, right? And so when you start to attach political ideology to the dirt that you live on, it becomes really hard to change your brain around it. And so, it feels like, if I live in a blue state and I start to think about red state ideals, I'm doing a disservice to my community, vice versa. When, there are a lot of, I think, again, there are some extreme positions out there that I feel very strongly about. I'll own that. But like, I think most of us want similar things for our communities, but we've just totally lost the ability to talk about that. And again, I think a lot of that also comes from this, to get back to where I started, like, us being challenged. How do we show up in a loving way when we're having these conversations, right? How do we show up with love for our schools? How do we show up with love for our students? How do we show up with love for our communities and our economies? What does it look like to have a loving economy as opposed to just one that maximizes as much revenue for people, right? Those are very different questions. And I think it's time for us to start filtering these aspects of our lives through that, to really ask ourselves, is this an act of love or not? When I'm voting, is that an act of love? And I don't think most people think of that when they're voting or when they're spending their money, when they're getting coffee, whatever it is. But I just think it's a filter that I'm trying to, as I watch. I mean, and some of that, some of that is a challenge to me in how I do show up to people who don't agree with my politics. Am I still loving them? Am I able to show up with love in the conversations I'm having with them? Which is tough for me right now because I'm angry and I feel strongly about a lot of different opinions right now regarding what's going on in the world. But I don't get anywhere in those conversations if I show up in that angry space.
No, I try to I try to maintain the humanity in it, and try to understand other points of views. Like, I definitely operate from a purple space. Because I don't think anybody's doing it right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's definitely things out there I don't necessarily like on all sides. And, you know what I mean? But I don't think anybody's doing it right. But I feel like what I don't like about the politics right now is there's just this dehumanization aspect to it. It's not human anymore. And I don't think we understand what government's supposed to do. You know what? Maybe this should be my what in the world is going on with. So you know what? I'm just gonna say this real quick. I think people have lost the idea that the point of government is actually to serve the people.
Yeah.
It's not a business to be ran. Businesses are meant fundamentally to make a profit.
Yeah.
The government's job is not that. So it's not about cutting things to the bone and saving a bunch of money. It's about providing the best services for the individuals that live in our communities so we can operate the best ways. The responsibilities that don't fall under the umbrella of anyone else to take care of.
Yeah.
And I think people have lost sight of what the point of it is.
Yeah.
It's been villainized.
Yeah. I think there's a piece to it too that, like, something I've been sitting with is the world is moving so fast where, most of us have like something in our pocket that we don't have any idea how to make sense of. Like, I don't understand how digital technology works, right? I don't understand how I can, like, push a button on my phone and my mom and I can talk through our phones and see each other, right? Like, I mean, like, I grew up watching Snow White when there was a magic mirror on the wall, and now I'm just like, oh, she had an iPhone. Like, it's just like, we thought that was magic back in the day, and now it's like a reality we all live with all the time. And, I think especially after the pandemic too, like, there's just so much we're uncertain of, but we're living in this era where we're asked to be certain all the time, right? We're asked to make these very certain decisions. And the way we're supposed to show up, I think, in our political ideologies especially, is with this certitude, right? I know who I'm voting for. I believe this fundamentally. And I think that doesn't give any space for our political leaders to be uncertain either, right? Like, the reality is, like, we're not satisfied. We don't think anyone's doing it right because everyone is doing their best to make sense of a world that's really confusing, right? And I just wish, like, if we could all just get a little bit more comfortable admitting we're uncertain about some of this stuff, and that there's a lot of uncertainty about where we're going. Like, I just feel like that for lack of a better word, grace we could show up with for each other would do so much to just, like, bring the temperature down in these conversations. But instead, we have to act like we know everything all the time, even though we don't know anything about what we're talking about.
I think I like this aspect you're going to very much, and you got a great point. I think to me, where we're stuck is we don't have a lot of brave individuals anymore to step out in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, and the system's not set up to actually allow you to rise to the top if you're in the middle. You've got to pick a side. Mm-hmm. And once you pick that side, then you're kind of really pushed to fall in line.
Well, because we have these machines. I mean, we call them political machines.
Yes.
Right? We have these machines that run people through office. I mean, if you're trying to run outside of that machine, there just isn't the infrastructure to get your name out.
Yeah.
And so, that's part of what's so hard about it is, again, like and again, we built that machine because it got us a result, but the result it's getting us, I think, just look at satisfaction rates with government right now. It isn't actually getting us what we want. And so at some point we need to be willing to say, hey, that machine, like, let's rethink it. Is using this machine that gets us the same result over and over again actually
I just think we need, like any good situation, you need to bring in another aspect of competition.
Yeah.
That's the thing that breaks it, right? That's what every good business, when there's a monopoly going on, and that's what we basically have is political monopolies. You've got to bring something else in that breaks it.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. We need something else that is brave to not walk on either side and say, I like a little bit of this and I like a little bit of that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And that there is the only way I think we can spin out of it.
And I mean, I'll throw this out just as and we need to not do that during a presidential election. We need to start doing that at local elections, right? Like we're not going to, people are too nervous when you're talking about an election at that high of stakes, to vote outside of the machine we've been taught we have to stay in. But people would at a local election, right? People would there are, I think, that's for anybody out there who's like a third party person. It's like, that's what my advice always is find some elections to run people in that are not where the stakes are lower for people to vote for it. Right. And then grow support, right? Like do good work in that role if you're elected to start changing the narrative so that it's easier for people to vote for you at a higher office down the road. Like grassroots it. Like if the very first person who's not a Democrat or Republican that wins an office is the president, I just don't imagine that that's the likely outcome, Nah. But I think a lot of this change can happen if we start to make change. I mean, I live in Princeton. We're just down the road from Ripon. The Republican Party was born in Ripon. It sits in my mind every day. Like political parties can be born in small towns in Wisconsin if people get together and start to change the way people think. And so if you're one of those people that's out there and thinks it's time for change, like start small, start local, make a movement happen there and see if you can grow it. Facts.
All right. My what in the world is going on with, and I'm going to try not to do a deep dive into this because you know what? Here's what I don't want to do for the next 4 years. I don't want to make all my what in the world is going on with political things. I'm gonna try to. Now this is for me. My guests get their own. As a guest, you get to do what you do. But I know I can go down rabbit holes, and I get on my soapbox and I lose my mind sometimes, and it turns into a 20-minute deal. So, but I'm gonna try to make this one. I'm gonna try not to get on my soapbox too high, and I'm gonna not try to go down a 20-minute rabbit hole. So, I'm just gonna say this: what in the world is going on with DEI and merit? And what I mean by this, right? I'm listening to the messaging about the people because they've made DEI a race thing. And the argument behind it for the most part is that, we're hiring individuals based on race, right? And that's their argument. We're not hiring people with merit. So we are going to get rid of it because we want to get back to hiring merit, right? Which that math don't math. Some of the DEI was invented because y'all weren't hiring on merit. Y'all were hiring.
I need to be able to push my applause button.
Oh, let me. Y'all were hiring on commonality and relationship and identity.
Mm-hmm.
They went to the same school as me, so I connect with them. Let's be honest, like that. A lot of people hire what's familiar more than they hire the talent that it is. They think that, oh yeah, you know what? It's going to fit in this space because I fit. And when they're doing the interview, that person, there's triggers that person gives that they relate to. Oh, you know what? I played football. I was on debate team. I did study abroad.
Mm-hmm.
I did. And then that's where that conversation goes. And then when you get out of that interview, you go, I really had a good feeling about that individual. But what doesn't tend to happen is when the other person totally is not connected to anything you're familiar with in your silo. You're a reinforced silo of a bunch of people that look like you, live in the same space as you, worship like you, have the same background, probably have the same educational attainment as you, just reinforcement. And you get something that's different and you interview it and they're everything you need. They got all the education, they got all the thing, but you know what they don't have? They don't have that familiarity. And you go back and you say, I can't just put my finger on it, but I think the other person's the better candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's that great study of like people changing names on job applications and just looking and same qualifications, same resume, just a different name, and how many times if the name does not sound that the person just doesn't get called for an interview, even though the qualifications are the exact same, right? I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Well, just all the things. And so to even go another thing, so I've just watched a bunch of videos yesterday about our leader talking about we're getting rid of this because it's trash, because we're going to go back to hiring people on merit. And then I look at the individuals pushed forward for some of the most powerful and important offices that are going to fill our federal government, and they have no merit. They have no experience. It's actually downright scary that we're about to put billions, put them in charge of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's, maybe millions, and billions of dollars, and they've never led anything bigger than a small nonprofit. If, maybe not even. But we're talking about merit and how we need to get rid of these special things. That is, just because you haven't given it a name doesn't mean that ain't some type of form of discriminatory something itself. That doesn't mean that that's not affirmative action, because that feels a lot like some type of reversed affirmative action when we are truly picking individuals who do not have the qualifications whatsoever to take on some of the most important things that control, that are parts of our everyday safety living here in the USA. I make that math make sense to me. So while you're dismantling all this other stuff and trying to make it associated to race thing, this other thing that happens feel more race-based to me than anything.
That's how
I'm just gonna keep it 100.
That's always been the part of it, though, that I think is so this is your 1984 sort of double speak type stuff, right? When it's merit, it tends to produce a single race and gender outcome, but when it's not, it doesn't, and that doesn't compute, right? Like it's language to actually, I don't know, distract us from an affirmative action program that's been happening for generations around white men advancing, right? And we know that the data's out there, like we know that that's the case, but it also, like, oftentimes, that confirmation bias too. It's like, well, you didn't look at this through the perspective we needed to look at this to. Well, why do you need us to look at through that perspective? Well, because that perspective is the white male perspective anyway, right? And so, if you're not sharing the way the people who are making those decisions see the world anyway, and you're not sharing it because it's not actually, because that worldview is harmful to you, then you're not going to do well on a merit-based scale that says, all I need you to do is say this worldview isn't harmful, right? And so part of it is like, the only way you have a true meritocracy is to have a really good test, right? What's the test we're using? I mean, that's the thing I want to see is that, okay, you want to shift to a meritocracy, show me the test, right? And show me that this test has been filtered through enough lenses to make sure it doesn't have a bias built into it. But every test is going to have a bias built into it. It's impossible to make a test that doesn't, right? We know that. I mean, you can get better or worse at that, but like that's what I would love to see is, okay, I mean, especially, you're working with all these AI tech bros, like where's the AI software that filters through all the candidates out there and comes up with the person who actually is the most qualified? Right?
Well, the problem with that is AI is also
biased.
I know,
and I know that that's not actually a solution, but I guess even if that was the case, right? Even if they came back to us and said, we really do want this to be a meritocracy, and so we did as much work as we could to try to get as close to a merit-based situation as possible. But as you're saying, when they say we want this to be a meritocracy, and we're going to intentionally appoint people who don't have the merit to fill these roles.
Yes.
And we're supposed to sit in that space,
it's supposed to make sense to it.
It's mind-boggling, right? But again, it's just like, and then there's just no, I mean, the pushback against that is
when I think about it, like if this merit thing is supposed to be about experience and education and stuff, the last time I checked, and this is in recent times, the most educated category of individuals in the U.S. right now is black women.
Correct. Yeah.
And so how come I don't see any of them in any of these spaces right now? Right now. Not saying they don't ever have a space, but right now, if this is about merit, and these are individuals that not only have the education, but tend to also have the professional backgrounds, and you can't even find one anywhere in your leadership, your math ain't mathing.
Yeah.
The math ain't mathing.
Well, and even that, like, I mean, so I went to grad school at Stanford, and there were, like, the program I did had a dual degree program with students who were in the business school. And one of the things that was really interesting to me about, like, having a little bit of a taste of the Stanford Business School is they owned that most of the education you got at the business school was networking, because most of the career opportunities you're going to get were going to be from social connections, not from your capacity, right? And that's one of the pieces of the puzzle that I don't think people talk enough about, is that,
facts.
I mean, having taught at this school I taught at Chicago, where every kid that came there was brilliant, not every kid had social connections, right? And so watching what happened after college, kids would get into these colleges, they would do very well in these colleges, and then the ones that then were able to leverage college into an opportunity for a really cool career path were mostly the ones that had parents who had social connections to help them get into those jobs, and the ones who didn't oftentimes just didn't have the connections, right? And there's the Greenhouse Scholars out of Colorado. They're now a national program, but they give first generation students scholarships for college. They just created a Greenhouse alums program, recognizing that they were seeing these really brilliant students that they had paid for to go through college, like their capacity to land and the careers they wanted. It didn't matter that they had gone to a good school. And so they now have this follow-on program where they keep working with them after they've graduated to make sure they're getting their foot in the door, right? And starting to build a social connection and social networks that help them, leverage this college experience into actual career paths. But that is, what I was told, the stat is 80% of job hires are based on networks and not based on skills or experience, right?
Facts.
Yeah, and so
this merit thing that they're talking about is a network thing.
Yeah,
that's really what they're saying.
Yes, it is. Well, and again, that compounds, right? If you don't have the network to get the first job, you're not going to have the network to get the second job, to get the third job, to move up the ladder, to eventually get, eventually when we do talk about it as a merit, when we're, especially in the conversation we're having now, when we're talking about meritocracy in these very high level positions, you have to have navigated a system to get to a place where you're in position to be considered for that position, right? And if you don't have the right connections to get you to that position, it's not going to do you any good, which is the black women problem, right? Like, they are doing very well in college, right? That is the demographic that right now is most successful academically in our society, but getting their foot in the door into the career paths that they should have access to if it's a true meritocracy is not the same situation, right? And so the opportunities, and then and where I get frightened right now is where there has been this foot in the door has been in DEI programs, right? Like, DEI programs, as they've gotten integrated into more businesses, have given companies an opportunity to see people in leadership that they maybe wouldn't have.
Right.
And people who start in DEI work sometimes are moving into different roles in a company because their capacity is visible, because they got their foot in the door.
Right. They finally got to see seen.
Yeah.
They got past the door.
Yeah. And so that is when they talk about shutting down DEI programs, what they're talking about is shutting down a door that got opened that helped people get into institutions that then helped their capacity and their merit be seen to help them move up the ladder into other roles, right? It was an additional, it's like we added a second door to the house so more people could get into the house, and then we could figure out what rooms they should be in over time.
We opened the network.
Yeah.
And the network that was a really closed door exclusive network said, all right, for a little while, for limited time only, we'll let you peek in the room.
Yeah.
We'll let you come in the room and sniff around a little bit.
Because it was, I mean, and this is a systemic problem that still needs to be addressed, but it was the one job in the institution where having the name look different on your resume got you the interview instead of
got you excluded from it.
Yeah. Right.
Facts.
And so that's, to me, it's not even just the institutional change that people in those roles were accomplishing. It's that it also now it's shutting a door. It's rebuilding a barrier to entry for career paths for people because you're getting back into a system now that doesn't likely enter, doesn't have those points of entry for other people.
Well, what I don't like about it right now is the problem that those who actually do have all the merit to actually have the job now automatically get reduced to being called a DEI hire. Mm-hmm. Like our vice president. Last time I checked, that really doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And was probably one of the most I shouldn't say our current vice president, our prior vice president, was a very qualified individual that had took all the steps, did all the things. Mm-hmm. And by the end, they were calling it a DEI. How? Yeah. So I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Wait, I want to say one more thing.
No, go ahead.
This is one of the most unique things about my life, an unexpected thing in my life. I grew up in Stevens Point. I grew up in a very white community. I went to St. Olaf College, which was a predominantly white college. I ended up teaching at this school in Burnsville. I still remember Ronnie and Yasmin, these two black girls that were in my sophomore English class, came up to me at the end of class one day and said, we like the way you teach. We're running this diversity team with another, and we want you to be an advisor, right? These two random students of mine, very first year of my career, invited me to be a part of this diversity team. And then the woman who was running it with me, this wonderful teacher named Judy Henderson, trained me. She sent me to a James Banks seminar, which that doesn't mean anything to probably most people listening, but he's the father of multicultural education. It was this incredible training. And it started me on this journey of learning how I could be a better advocate, a better steward for all communities that I was working with at the time as a teacher, but it's been helpful in this work too. The thing that has never made sense to me that I want to say, as long as this is your soapbox today, that has been the biggest blessing in my life, hands down. DEI work is love. It is culture. It is, it has been so beautiful to be on the inside of that work. And all it is meeting people, knowing people, seeing people, helping people get opportunity. It's everything people say they want to do with their lives, everything people say they want to be a part of in community. And to me, the saddest thing about the way DEI is talked about in our society is it's talked about as hard work and fear that white people should be afraid of, when the experience of it as a white person who's been lucky enough to help do this work is that it is anything but that. Yes, there are hard moments in it. Yes, there are things I've had to learn about myself that I've had to unlearn. Yes, there are challenges, and there's real fear and there's real harm being caused out there. But the work itself is such a beautiful thing, and I wish more people understood that. I wish more people understood that, that this is something you want to be doing. This is something you want happening in your community. This is not anybody who's telling you that this is anything but creating more loving, more empowered, more beautiful, more vibrant and thriving communities is feeding you a line of bullshit. And I can tell you that from firsthand experience as a white kid from Stevens Point who got the fortunate life path to be brought into the world.
Soapbox off. There's so many things. There's so many things I want to but I'll tell you why, because I know how this works, and we'll talk about this for 30 more minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna back out because, believe it or not, we're on the first segment. We ain't did nothing yet, and we're already an hour in.
I love it.
So, but what I will say to you, Greg, is thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Next segment. Next segment is called 21 Questions. This is the opportunity where I get to ask some questions. Not 21, but these are such good questions. We might get 21 answers because we're in it, right? Okay. You ready to jump in?
Yeah.
What are you grateful for?
I'm going to say right now I'm grateful for Yasmin and Ronnie, as long as I just brought them up. The opportunity to be invited into doing cool work and having the privilege of making more people's lives better has been great. including my own.
What motivates you?
I mean, injustice motivates me. I feel very called to doing what I can to make sure more people have access to opportunities.
What grounds you?
My family. I think my family's been very good at knowing who I really am. So when I get off on a tangent one way or the other, they're very good at bringing me back to where I'm supposed to be. I feel lucky to have their unconditional support, but I also feel lucky to have their lens looking at my life. So if I get off track or start to get off track, I know that they're going to love me through getting back on track.
What does success look like to you?
You know, I tend to enjoy success most when it's a shared success. I like pulling a team together and having something happen that gives people opportunities. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love working with entrepreneurs and entrepreneur coaching. Is it, for me, it was an opportunity to have my success also be somebody else's success. And I that type of opportunity is cool. I love, it's fun for me to get to work with Oshkosh, because if I'm successful, Oshkosh will be successful, right? I love that more than anything.
What irritates you?
I'm often irritated by institutions. I'm often irritated by a sense that things that happen have to be the way they happen in the future. The most annoying thing to me in the world is somebody telling me, well, we tried that before and it didn't work. Because if you tried it before, it meant you wanted it to work. So why would you tell me when I'm trying to make it work a second time that just because it didn't work before, it's not worth trying through a different path? Yeah, the sense that we need things to stay the way they are because it's easy is really, really frustrating to me.
Facts. What scares you?
I mean, right now, honestly, I'm scared. I'm a gay man living in small town Wisconsin. That's where most of our fear lies. I mean, we feel very loved by the community, but we're living in a time where a lot of the harm that's caused to people who are not in the dominant narrative is caused by a radical outsider who has a fluke moment. And so I don't think there's ever an opportunity to live without some degree of fear in the existence we're choosing to live for ourselves.
You over here dropping dimes.
Sorry.
Loving it. No, look, I just wanted to call it out for what it was.
Yeah.
Facts.
Yeah.
What recharges your soul?
I'm an extrovert by profession and an introvert by recharge. I really love alone time. So my favorite alone time, I mean, it's not entirely alone because my parents are usually there, but my parents live on a lake up in Eagle River. And so to get time on the water, if I can get a water ski in, if I can just get a good swim in, if I can get some time with a book, but quiet nature, if there are people around, their family, but sort of that ability to not perform and not feel the need to take care of other people is really nice.
How do you define love?
I mean, I've referenced this before. I think the biggest thing for me is I think love is way bigger than romantic love. I think the most powerful love is love as a worldview. And for me, that is really stopping to think about how you can live a life and make decisions that creates the most opportunity and pathways for the most people to be successful and happy.
What is the most memorable life lesson you learned from a parent, a guardian, or a mentor?
I mean, I kind of referenced this one too, but my mom, again, was a special ed teacher. I think growing up in a household with a special ed teacher really changes the way you see difference across people, especially like neurodiversity. And so her capacity to make a commitment to make sure every student was successful in her classroom was something that I think informed my worldview significantly.
Okay. Last question, but it comes with a scenario. So you have been invited to be the keynote for a huge summit, right? Talking about things. Let's make it a placemaking summit.
Sure.
Right? Things that you are an expert at, things you are highly passionate about, right? What is that walkout song? What is the song that you need played to walk out in all of your greatness in your presence?
So I'm not the best at like picking a song for this type of stuff, but I asked Matt, my partner, which song I should do, and he said I should do Virgo's Groove, Beyonce. I think it's like it's from her first Renaissance album. It is a queer anthem. I'm also a Virgo, and I do show up, as much as I'm not somebody who necessarily subscribes to astrology deeply, it is crazy to me how often it shows up in a way in my life that makes sense for me. So he thought that would be a good anthem for me to walk out to.
I like it.
Yeah.
I don't know this song. I'm gonna go find
Listen
this
to it.
song.
You'll dance.
Yeah.
It'll be good. Yeah. You'll walk out with a strut. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, you have survived 21 questions.
Thank you.
Next segment. Next segment is called Word Association. Word association is where I'm going to say some words to you, and you're going to tell us what comes to your mind. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here at the Kosh, we got a long-standing tradition of we always start with the same word. And to me, this word is everything. This is the word of love. This is the word of community. This is the word of family. This word is food.
So Horseradish Kitchen and Market, I'm going to give a shameless plug. That's my partner's restaurant. And when I think of food, I mean, that's the space we make all our food in. And so we use the restaurant kitchen as our own kitchen when no one's there. So it isn't just a restaurant to us. It's like the place where we invite people into our lives to eat food with us.
Ooh, tell me more about this restaurant.
Yeah, so my partner's name is Matt. He's a fourth generation Princetonian. So he started some businesses in Princeton, Wisconsin, and he has a restaurant there called Horseradish Kitchen and Market, and then a hotel called Parlor Hotel. And the restaurant is a sandwich shop. Elegant sandwiches is the way he describes it. So they're twists on sandwiches you've eaten before, but they're not like any sandwich you've ever eaten before. Works with a local baker, Renard's Bakery, to have fresh bread every day. And it's delicious. So if you're in Oshkosh, Princeton is like a 45-minute drive. It's if you just need a day trip to eat a good meal. And then there's great antiquing in Princeton as well. So swing on down sometime and say hi. And I'm usually there. I'm often the one washing dishes. Everyone in town thinks my job is the dishwasher, which I love. No one has any idea what I do in Princeton outside of helping Matt out. So that's kind of been a fun experience too, is just being in a role where my job is just to kind of support his businesses and have the community kind of think that's what I do with my time.
I am about this life. I want one of these sandwiches.
Yeah. I should have brought you one. I will make sure you get fed. They're good.
All right. I'm holding you to this because we will road trip.
Yeah.
Cocktail or beer?
Cocktail, Manhattan.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I love a good. That's like if it's been a long day, our go-to after a long day drink is to make a couple Manhattans.
Manhattan is a no joke drink. That's right there with martini.
Yeah.
Like they close cousins.
Yeah, I mean, I love a Sazerac too, and a Sazerac is even just a little bit bitier than a Manhattan, but they're good.
Shop local.
I mean, life. You want political power? Shop local. That's where it all is. If you're frustrated that it feels like your community doesn't have resources anymore to do anything, and you're spending all your money at chains and franchises that are sending all of the profits out of your community, don't be surprised. Shop local is a political strategy. It is a way you make your community strong and thriving.
Concert.
I mean, what comes to mind first is outdoor live music. Concerts in Wisconsin in the summer on the grass, ideally with water nearby, which you all do in spades here.
Well, water's everywhere here.
Yeah.
So, that ain't hard to do. What's the best concert you've ever been to?
That's a good question. I've been to, so my music tastes are all over the place. So I've been to everything from, I've been to some really cool jazz concerts. I sang in a jazz group in high school, and the director, a shout out to Dick Johnson, he was an amazing choir director, and he took us to shows that were, I mean, we saw these people that, like, I could say names that people aren't necessarily going to be anything, but like Gene Perling was this incredible jazz arranger, and we went to a tribute concert for him that was done by a group called New York Voices. That was a really big jazz group at the time. And so we just got to see, I mean, I think that was music high school kids in Wisconsin, small town Wisconsin, just weren't accessing, and we weren't just accessing it, we were like seeing it live, which was cool. I went through a country phase and got to see Garth Brooks in his heyday, which isn't as big of a deal to me now, but at the time was a really cool show. Matt and I went to see The Jungle recently, which is like techno music, and we went to the Sylvia in Madison, and that was a super fun show because we were like everyone there I think was in college except for us. We were like the old men at the show. And that was just really fun. Saw Sturgill Simpson at the Salt Shed recently. He's a retro country artist. So I mean his style is more, it's like indie country. So that was good.
What is the Salt Shed?
The Salt Shed is the old Morton Salt Factory in Chicago over on Elston Avenue. They just turned into a music venue.
Oh,
it's great. It's a really cool venue. They've got an outdoor concert venue and an indoor concert venue, but the outdoor concert venue, you can actually like see the Chicago River and the downtown, and it's a pretty epic space. It's worth checking out.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fire.
Yeah.
Now I want to go to the Salt Shed. And I got a new restaurant in Princeton I need to go visit.
Yeah, we're going to add to your list.
I'm learning. I'm learning today. Streaming.
I mean, I'm a big podcaster, so I'm trying to think. I just listened to the telepathy tapes. Has anyone else listened to this?
No.
Okay, add this to your list. Telepathy tapes, I don't know. I mean, I haven't like verified if any of this is actually real, but it's a woman who interviews mostly parents and teachers of nonverbal autistic kids because there's some evidence out there that they're telepathic. And like, I mean, it sounds a little hard to believe.
It sounds a little woo.
It like, and that's part of where like I haven't done my homework enough to like know enough about this, but I know she's about to do a second season, and the season is going to be in partnership with research at University of Virginia. Like there apparently like there have been people trying to document this for a long time, and it's so challenging to our like materialistic understanding of the world that people don't want to believe there's any truth to it. So it just gets shut down. And that's like basically what her podcast is about, is like, this is something we should actually study, because they're teaching these nonverbal autistic humans to use a form of spelling that focuses more on their motor skills than their communication skills. And then they're spelling things that like their parents are thinking without their parents saying it. It's trippy. It's bizarre, but I also like, it gets me into that space of uncertainty. Like I struggle with it so much as somebody who's like very much loves a scientific understanding of the world, but I'm also trying to live in a space where I'm open to being wrong. Like how many times have we been wrong before? Right. So I'm like, if anybody thinks there's possibility to this, why wouldn't we? And it could improve the lives of these, nonverbal autistic students. Like,
bruh.
Like, let's give it a shot, and if it opens our minds in a way that at some point maybe I can be telepathic. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't really want people reading my thoughts, but I think I don't know, it just like, I mean, that gets me back to like that comment I made about FaceTime. Like, I don't get that. I don't get how that works. I don't get how my phone can send a message to you through some sort of radio waves or magnetic field or whatever it is that's doing that. Like, if that's out there and it's possible for my phone to do it, like how much of a stretch is it for somebody's brain to be able to do the same thing? So telepathy tapes, stream it.
Woo.
I need more people to talk to about it, because I don't know what to think of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to take the challenge.
Yeah, good.
I'm taking the challenge.
You can listen to it in your car while you drive to get a sandwich from Horseradish.
Okay.
See?
Look.
See, we're pulling it all together.
Well, that's... You
can pick me up and we go to a show at the Salt Shed, and we'll have even more time to listen.
Hey, I'm liking this. You know what? The thing about the Kosh is there is a lot of lessons, community lessons to be learned through the Kosh and these conversations.
Yeah.
We learn a lot. Community.
I mean, community's life, right? Like that. So I mentioned my partner. I was a late to the party gay. I didn't come out until I was 40. It took me a long time to figure out. And there was a stretch in my life where I thought I was just meant to be single. And I really, really loved that stretch of my life, because it really made me lean into community as where I found relationship with people. I think it was a really beautiful stretch of time. I think, we're told how these relationships are supposed to work in our lives and who's supposed to be what to us. And I was living in a way where that just wasn't enough. So I got to be like a better uncle, a better brother, a better friend. I got to invest a little bit more deeply in those relationships. And then my work is all community focused, right? So that's been really cool too. I just think that there is so much more for us in community. That's this is becoming a soapbox speech, but one of the things I read recently talked about how like the nuclear family is really an American invention, that there are very few cultures or societies. When we talk about bias, like most people, most societies over time, over history, have not valued the nuclear family the way that we do, but it was an economic decision. When you live in a nuclear family, everyone needs their own house, they need their own lawnmower, they need their own drill, they need their own groceries, and you need to pay a lot to have your elders taken care of because they don't live with you. You need to pay a lot for childcare because your elders don't live with you. It just, I think that there's a lot about the way that we have been told we're supposed to live in these very tight and small groups that prevents us from having deep connections with humans that live around us. And so I think that that's, to me, one of the areas and opportunities for change is thinking about how we understand that the community around us is valuable to us, right? I mean, even just that's a stat I heard once, is most people don't run their drill for more than 10 hours total, right? So who needs their own drill? Like, a drill should be at the library and you should just go rent it, because most, a community probably needs 5 or 6 drills at a time, especially a community this size. You could have in your neighborhood a tool shed that you all just borrowed tools from. There might have to be a sign out. There might be a day where you don't have the drill right when you need it. But other than that, you're probably not going to be inconvenienced at all. It's just stuff like that, right? It's all just in how we view community and what community can and should do for us. And I think we've just, started to scratch the surface of that, because we've been told we're supposed to do everything on our own.
I like that idea, actually. And you're right. You make a whole run to the hardware store.
Yeah.
Right? And I might use my drill 2 times a year.
Yeah, if that, right?
And drop $100 for one.
Yeah.
No, right?
Yeah. And then again, by the time you use it again, you lost your battery pack, so you have to go buy a new one.
Right, or it doesn't charge anymore. All of the things, or I lost my bits. Yeah. All of the things.
Yeah, you'll buy 8 drills over your lifetime and use none of them frequently enough to actually own one.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
Last word, diversity.
I mean, diversity is pathways, right? It's recognizing that my version of success and happiness shouldn't have to be the same as anyone else's for the community to invest in that pathway existing. And I think that that's, whether we're talking schools, whether we're talking cities, whether we're talking workplaces, it's accepting that the more people who want to do more different things to find their own version of happiness, the better off your organization is going to be, and getting out of this singularity that there's a best way to navigate life in a company, right? You need employees at all levels doing all work. You need students of all types learning all things. You need community members of all types adding value in all different ways. And the more we understand that there's other people's lives aren't there to validate our own, right? That validation does not come from replication. I get to be who I am, and I should want other people to be who they are. That's when a society, I think, starts to really, really thrive in a vibrant and beautiful way.
You have survived word association.
Thank you.
All right. I know.
Take a drink.
Take a drink. It's heated. Okay. Next segment. Next segment is called Kosh Hidden Gems. And this is your opportunity to share a hidden gem with us. It does not have to be in the Kosh. It can be anywhere. What's your hidden gem?
So I want to give a shout out to Sunken Paddle Cider Works. I think they actually maybe are sponsored today too. I'm not sure about that. If they're not, I'm just going to throw it out. I love local businesses. Obviously, that's going to be pretty obvious from what's going on. But when you think about one of the biggest challenges of a local business is that you have to get started, and you have to get started in a way that's economically makes sense for you. And because of that, Sunken Paddle's kind of in this hidden, I don't even know if you can call it a commercial district. They're floating on their own.
They're in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's a neighborhood cidery.
Yeah.
Literally.
But it's not in a place. I mean, they're not in the downtown. They're not in the sawdust district. They're not next to anything where people are going to find them without knowing they exist. Right.
Yep.
But they're doing great work. The cider is good. It's a cool, to me, they're positioned to grow and become a really important asset to the community. And I think they're doing it right. They're just local guys with a dream, in day jobs working hard. So to me, like when I think about like a truly hidden, I mean, it is truly a hidden gem. It is good stuff that I would guess most people living in the Kosh have no idea exists in the community yet. But once you find them, you'll be glad you did.
Oh, facts. No, we got mad love for them. Yes, they have sponsored many, many episodes. Yeah. Love Spencer and Doug. And did you know they made a cider called the Kosh?
I did not, but that is not surprising to me. And again, like already they're so locally aware, right? Like that is, to me, that's how like the best businesses are, is that they're not just trying to sell their own product. They're trying to figure out ways to celebrate and sell the products around them. And, I think that they understand the potential in Oshkosh and the ecosystem here and are living it really well, even if they're not thinking about that directly. They're just making good choices, and the choices they're making are so in line with the best future of Oshkosh. So it's cool to see.
Big time. Well, we actually went down there. The Kosh is not an accident. That was us partnering with them.
Good.
And creating a habanero and blackberry cider.
Nice. I have not had that one yet. I will have to try that one.
Well,
now that's on my list of things to do.
You know what? We can actually put it into the episode. If you want to do a tasting, we can do a tasting right now.
I'm always open for that.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, we're going to make that our commercial break after we have this commercial break. Because first, what we got to do is we got to take a small brittle break.
Hey, Timber, this is Orson.
This is Yao. Hashtag
the Brittle Daddies. Timber, every week you've got amazing guests, and we want to give them something for being part of your experience.
Let's give them the pecan brittle. It's the perfect brittle, the right combination of sweet and savory.
How about you give this to your guests who have the sweetest stories?
And if your guests or listeners would like to find out more about Share's Ghana-style brittle, have them check out www.sharesgsb.com.
So sweet. Okay, we're out.
Deuces!
Okay. We want to send a huge shout out to the Brittle Brothers over there at Share's. We appreciate you so much. But you know what we need? We need brittle, y'all. We have been missing our brittle taste testing for some time. So, Yao, Orson, get on it. Bring us brittle for these Kosh guests. Now, what the brittle break allowed us to do was to actually go run and grab some cider so we can do a cider tasting. Because, what's better than being on the Kosh and having some of the Kosh? Yeah. So right now we have already cracked it open. Give it a smell.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah, that's serious, right?
These guys know what they're doing. They make a good product.
Oh, they make a great product. Okay, go for the taste.
Yeah. Okay, this will be my new favorite. There's a little bit of heat, just a little bit. It's a nice little touch in there, and then the blackberry tastes great.
Yes, that's real right there.
When did you come up with the flavor combinations for this?
Yes.
Nice. Yeah.
Yes. And it comes from, there's a drink, and so we want to send a huge shout out to our other friends over at Sturgeon Spirits.
Oh yeah.
So Sturgeon Spirits,
another hidden gem.
Yes. So we have a cocktail on the menu called the Kosh.
Okay.
And we came up with that as a version. It was a drink called the Perfect Pear, and I was like, let's make that with blackberry.
Yeah.
And that was blackberry and habanero.
Right.
So then we just carried it over to the cider. And so we like this blackberry habanero combo because it's got a little something about it.
Yeah. You need to work. I'm going to forget their name. There's a candle company in Oshkosh too. I mean, they don't actually make candles. They make the wax that everyone uses their candles for.
Oh yeah.
But you got to get them to help you make this into a candle scent too.
Oh.
Then you're gonna have a full line of Kosh products.
Hey.
Matt will do your branding and packaging.
So thank you for taking a little time and doing a Kosh tasting. We appreciate that. And big shout out to our friends over there as Sunken Paddle. I can't wait till the tasting room opens back up. Right now, the tasting room is closed. Otherwise, that was a regular Saturday field trip.
Yeah. It is like I said, if you are living in Oshkosh and you have not been there yet, it is worth the venture. They're doing cool stuff.
They are doing cool stuff. Okay. Well, we are ready for our next segment. And the next segment is my favorite segment. And that segment is story time. So this is an opportunity for our guest to tell us a story.
Yeah, so I figured I should get us back to placemaking, since that's the reason I initially came in for this. And so, and I wanted to tell this story because I thought it was, for anybody who was kind of out there in the Kosh listening and thinking about the work we're getting started with Discover Oshkosh. I think this is a really cool story of how communities can show up and do this work. So my very first client was a group in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. Detroit Lakes, Minnesota is about like 45 minutes from Fargo, so very far northwest corner of Minnesota. And I had met a woman there, Amy Stearns. Shout out to Amy Stearns. She's a rock star nonprofit leader. She was running an organization there called the Historic Homes Theater at the time. And she had been approached by somebody who had started a business a long time ago and just sold his part of the business, called Lake Shirts T-shirt Company. So T-shirt Company doesn't sound that big of a deal, but these guys grew a printing company that printed all the shirts for the NCAA. So they eventually became the main printer for big contract shirts. And so really impressive manufacturing and printing company up in Detroit Lakes. And when he sold his shares of the company, he said, I want to use my money to give back to this community, and I want to give back in a really unique way that just makes this the coolest place to live. Recognizing how many small towns are challenged with workforce attraction, retention, people tend to be moving to big cities now. He's like, I want us to start thinking about ways to make Detroit Lakes a competitor with these bigger cities that kids are moving to, by having so much cool stuff to do here and so much going on here that people are excited to live here too. And so Amy called me up and said, I have a really rare opportunity. I'm going to get, there's a big donation to start a new nonprofit that hasn't even been designed yet. And she had heard me speak at a conference and was like, I want to work with you just to get this off the ground. So I went to Detroit Lakes and met with the community, kind of like a meeting with people in Oshkosh. I spent a couple of days there. I met with 200 people while I was there, and we just kind of heard the same thing. What are your hopes and ambitions? And helped Amy put together this nonprofit. And the nonprofit has been kicking butt, getting stuff done. They just put in 7 trolls, those big, wood sculpture, out in the woods, trolls that are 3 stories tall. They've done a music festival. They are they hired somebody to coach and support entrepreneurs. They are working on mountain bike trails, and it's just amazing. They just jumped in, and and what's cool is the initial donation that started the nonprofit has been leveraged to have matching funds and other donations, so they're more than doubling and tripling the initial donation by having other people invest in these community projects too. But it's just people in a community that wanted to see cool stuff get done, that invested and found a way to make that happen. And that is their tagline is do cool stuff, do cool shit if you're in the know. But they always say DCS after everything they do. It's just let's find ways to work together to get as much stuff done as possible. And I think that's that to me is the energy that every community needs to learn, is that we're told the city does stuff, or we're removed from who gets to have impact in a community, but it really is just a group of friends with enough commitment can get a really cool project done. And I think that that's why this story is always a fun one to tell, is they're a perfect example of that. Just a group of friends forming an organization, finding resources, inviting the community to help them think through what could get done. And they're worth it. It's project412mn.org if you want to check them out. But a really great example of how this work happens and how they can have impact. And if you look at, if you follow them on Instagram or look at what they've accomplished so far, you're going to be amazed. It's just really cool stuff.
Well, you saying that really does make me go back to something you said earlier in this episode, that Oshkosh is well positioned to do something similar.
I mean, and you all know this. I mean, if you just like drive around, like you have water, like I've never seen a community have water before, right? Like, I mean, Lake Winnebago, like Butamore, the river between them. I mean, there's so much water here, which people love. The downtown is great, but you also have like the whole South Shore district, the Sawdust District, as they're calling it, Oregon Street, like these pockets in Highholder, like where the Sunken Paddle guys are, like there are all these little gems around the community that just need a little love and need a little update, need some support for local businesses to go in them, right? You have a university here that, I don't even know if people in this community know this. I worked on a project that UWO did that was all about helping communities build entrepreneurial ecosystems. Like you have experts on campus that know how to do this very work that helps to support more local business growth in town, right? So it is just about connecting people. It's about finding people who have good ideas and getting them connected to resources that support those ideas into actual businesses and projects in the community. And that's what's fun about the role I'm playing, and where I like want to give a shout out right now to this work. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I've always had an idea for a business or an art project or a bike trail or a kayak launch or whatever it is, but something that would grow a stronger sense of place in Oshkosh, like that's what Discover Oshkosh is trying to accomplish with this project, is making it easier for community members with these great ideas to get the support they need to turn those ideas into projects that are completed. And, and that's what I got hired to do, is find those projects, support those projects, get as many of them done as we can.
Well, we shouldn't wait any longer. Let me just go on and key this up. Gosh, listeners, every single time I hear it, I love it, and it means that it is time for the topic of the week. And the topic of the week is picked by our guest 99.9% of the time. And guess what? This week isn't any different. And as you could tell, we were already rolling into the topic of the week, so we're going to get back to it.
Yeah, so we're talking about placemaking again, and again, just trying to make sure everyone is aware of what this work is and how it works. And I think a really cool opportunity here to sort of integrate some of the conversations we've had before. I talked a little bit about my time as a teacher. Where I can thread those two lives together is that placemaking for me has been very similar to project-based learning for students, right? Students would come to me with project ideas or papers they were writing, and I would try to help coach them through that to an execution. And placemaking at its best is saying to the community, come up with projects, come up with things you want to learn or do in town, and then we want to help you through those projects, right? It is inviting the community to reclaim ownership of its community. I've talked about this work a lot as like fighting invasive species. So if anyone disagrees with us out there, you're welcome to throw your emails my way to see if you have a different perspective on this. But economic development for the last however many years, like 30, 40 years, has really been about site prep for bringing chains and franchises into towns. You can see it in Oshkosh all along 41, right? We leverage public dollars to take what historically was farm fields or open land. We spend a lot of money getting infrastructure into those, parking lots, curbs and gutters, water, sewer, whatever else, and then oftentimes we give a tax break to a business that is located elsewhere in the community, bringing a branch of that business here, right? And so we invited the Walmarts, the Potbellies, whatever it is,
all of
into
them.
town.
There's
right?
a lot of them.
Yeah, and there is, that is economic activity, right? It does create jobs. The challenge I find in that particular strategy of economic development is the owner of that company does not live in your community. And when the owner of that company does not live in your community, a number of things happen. One, it's way easier to not pay your employees a living wage because you don't have to see them, right? Two, whatever wealth or profits are made don't exist in your town, right? That money goes elsewhere. If you have a Target, it goes to Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a thriving city for a good reason. They're one of the main chains and franchises that is in almost every community is funneling its main profits to the Twin Cities. Great. The Twin Cities are doing great for that, right? And I'm not opposed to chains and franchises. The point of this is that you want to own those chains and franchises. You want to be growing your own chains and franchises that move into other communities, to grow that wealth back here, because it's not just the profits, it's also the managerial level positions, which are your high paying, more wealthy individuals. And so
it's your taxpayer base.
Yeah, right. And so they're also your donor base, right? Those are the people who fund your boys and girls clubs, who make sure your food bank has enough food in it, right? Like if you don't have that upper manager in your community, it's really hard to raise the money to run the nonprofits that serve people who are falling on hard times, right? And so, it also just is cool to have local businesses, right? Like, I mean, it's cooler to drink Sunken Paddle than it is to drink some cider I've never, that I'm never going to interact with the owner. It's cool to be able to shake hands with people, right? And so that's really what started motivating my interest in placemaking, was trying to figure out how to regrow this sort of local ownership economy. And something that hit me in the process of doing this, especially as I was doing it through an arts organization at the time, is that people wanted, if I continue with the invasive species metaphor, people wanted like an old growth tree to suddenly plop in their community. It's like, I want Facebook to exist in Oshkosh. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. I mean, it could. It is a fluky circumstance if somebody who has a tech innovation that is going to grow into Facebook is living here right now. Mm-hmm. What isn't a fluke is that you have artists that already live in your community, right? There are local creative people. There are artists that live in every community. And if local art starts to get celebrated and supported and purchased, what happens is people usually, if they're interested in local art, start to want local food, local music, right? If they want local food, they're going to want local beverages. If they want local beverages, they're going to want other local products. And you start to train people into appreciating local goods again. And you grow over time the conditions that then also make it more attractive for a local tech entrepreneur to locate in your community, because that's what Brookings Institution talks about. The number one indicator of somebody likely starting a business in a community is the quality of life in that community, right? You can have all the incentives, all the supports, all the programs possible. If they don't like living there, they're not going to. And in a digital age, with the brilliant people we're talking about, these people can live anywhere in the world they want to, right? And so that's why you see like Portland's and Austin's and San Francisco's, like these communities that have really invested in quality of life, suddenly becoming tech hubs and innovation hubs, right? And so that's really what we're talking about, is like, how do we start to make the quality of life investments that get people really excited to live in Oshkosh? And in doing that and raising the quality of life bar here, how do we also do that through supporting locally owned businesses, locally owned artists, local artists, locally owned businesses, local brewers, local food makers, and you already have a lot of that happening. It's just about shifting our resources from taking money to put more curb and gutter in along 41 to saying, let's take that same money and turn it into revolving loans and grants for these local business owners to help them grow more successfully. Let's get Sunken Paddle into a location where the tasting room can stay open year round, right? Like, how do we do that? How do we leverage our resources to find and grow successful local businesses so that the quality of life here continues to grow, the number of cool things happening in the community continues to grow? And so, like, as crazy as it may sound that starts with a mural, in my experience, it almost always starts with a mural, right? You paint a mural in a part of town that people haven't been paying attention to, and just that like coat of paint on a surface that has stayed the same for 20, 30 years makes people go, oh, this area can change, right? And people start to drive or walk to that space. And when they're driving and walking to that space, what are they going to do? They're going to look at the other buildings around it. They're going to wonder where the next mural is going to pop up. And in the process of doing that, they're going to see likely a vacant or dilapidated building that actually has a lot of promise or character. And that building then becomes a building owned by the next business owner, especially if, again, we're creating the right, for creating rehabilitation grants or facade grants or other things like that help these business owners take over dilapidated spaces and turn them into cool businesses. So just to me, like, art is the first flora and fauna that catches in an ecosystem you're trying to regrow that's been invaded by these invasive species. And if you can leverage art into bigger and bigger projects, you can, over time, get that old growth tree, that tech business, whatever it is, back in your community, because you'll have the creative people here to do that sort of innovating, and you'll have the resources to support them.
So how long have you been roaming around Oshkosh now?
I mean, I think I got connected to Amy in like August. I think we officially started doing these interviews in October. So I've been around for just a handful of months. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the biggest opportunity you've really seen? Because you're a strategist.
Yeah. I mean,
and you've covered a lot of different points, and you're speaking at a point where, I personally, as you talk about some of this, I'm thinking of parts of towns and different things. But it sounds like you've also maybe done a little touring. You've been taking a few places,
just a little. Yeah.
But what's really struck you?
To me, there are two opportunities that are like so ripe for this that are most likely where we'll focus our initial energies. One is that the city has invested in this river walk. Oshkosh has, as far as I calculated, it's like 12 miles of bikeable, walkable trail along the riverfront that runs all the way from Lake Winnebago to Highway 41 in a loop. It is not perfect. There are sections of that trail that still need to be addressed. There are sections where you're going to be biking through a neighborhood, but again, that's always cute, so no problem there. But it is, for the most part, a pretty complete loop at this point. Amy Albright has the coolest metaphor for it because she calls it a mansion with no furniture. You have the hard part done in that you built the infrastructure to get that sidewalk around, but there's nothing to really do or draw you to that sidewalk. And so that's a place where sculptures, public arts, kayak launches, murals, thinking about how that sidewalk connects to downtown, to the arena, to, Titan Stadium, to campus, to Lakeshore Park and Oshkosh Corp, like all those things. Like, you have so much. The river historically, when we talk about culture change, the river historically has been a dividing line in Oshkosh, right? Like, if you're north of the river, you don't really go south of the river. You're south of the river, you don't really go north of the river. The river should be your main artery. It should be your main point of connection that everything sparks off of. It is actually very easy to have dinner downtown in Oshkosh and walk to a concert at the stadium. Right? It just culturally feels like something you don't do here. And so if you energize that river walk and you get to people to start biking, walking along it, what will happen is people will realize that is also like a safe transportation route for moving from parts of the community to other parts of the community. And it will start to make the river in the community, again, the center, the heart of the community instead of this dividing line. So to me, like, that's the immediate and coolest opportunity, and like doing some planning specifically that figures out how do you get campus to recognize the value of the riverfront? How do you get downtown to recognize the value of the riverfront? The second one is the Sawdust District. It's there are a lot of things already. I mean, I know the stadium exists there. I know the stadium's had, like a little bit of a rocky start, but the stadium exists there. It's a cool amenity. I mean, the coolest amenity probably in that whole area is Fifth Ward Brewing, right? Like, they're knocking it out of the park again. Locally owned.
Killing it.
UW,
Big shout out to them over
yeah,
there.
Right. Like exactly what you want to see happen in this community. Like, two college kids who stayed in town and started a business, and that business is cool. The space is great. Like, no one was thinking about that particular location as a hub before they reinvented it into something amazing, right? But there are tons of buildings down there that are in that same space. There's a bunch of vacant land in that area, and there is in process, like, there's a micro hospital that Theta Care is building right now. There's a new apartment complex that's being built down there, and so it is going to have this fusion of both professional activity and like residential activity, and that is, when we talk about the bones of Oshkosh being really good here, like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, you have a warehouse district. Like, a lot of the other areas around here don't have a warehouse district. Warehouse districts, I mean, check them out in any major city that's thriving right now. Those warehouse districts have become their concert venues, their restaurant scene. Like, that is where so much like creative energy is happening. They're great spaces for artists. A lot of them, a lot of warehouses have loading docks and like commercial viability that allows you to put a kiln in, or something else that allows you to do some production, right? So you can start to have these mixed use neighborhoods where I can go watch a glass blower blow some glass. I can then go grab a beer from a glass they made at Fifth Ward Brewing, and I can grab dinner and then go to a show, and it like suddenly is this super vibrant, like thriving part of town. So again, I think some of that just starts with, some work to brand the neighborhood. You can use some art to do some cool projects that get people to understand the vibe of the neighborhood a little bit better, but also to help people get to realize they can move around that neighborhood, right? I would love to see art installations, whether it's a sculpture walk or a mural walk or something like that, that actually people want to take in multiple pieces in that neighborhood, because it right now is mostly a space people drive through to get to downtown. It is not really a space people are walking, strolling, whatever,
Right.
spending time in that way.
Okay. How do you pitch this to the people who've lived here their whole lives and can't see the vision, or don't, or are change challenged? I don't want to say they don't want the change.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's it. I always think people who fight change love change once it's happened. It's the idea of it that's scary.
Yeah, I think there are a handful of things about that are important. I mean, one of the reasons why I try to spend as much time talking to people as possible, and I always the door's always open. If there are other people listening to this that think I need to hear more or talk to more people, send those names my way. I'm happy to sit down and talk to anybody. I love sitting down with groups, especially because it does, speed the process up a little bit, but also I find that there's good energy in people playing off each other's ideas. One of the things I think is important is you have to find ways to integrate the existing history and culture of the community. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever do this project, but one of the projects that's on my radar is Louis Hine, the photographer, is from Oshkosh. He was born in Oshkosh. He was actually born in the same location that Jambalaya Arts Cooperative is in right now. They moved homes eventually, but his second home location is where Opera Square is now. So 2 cultural amenities in the downtown. When, before he passed away, he put all of his artwork in the public domain. So his artwork is usable by other people. There's no, copyright infringement if you're using his art. And I know that there have been, I know the Payne did an exhibit with him. Jambalaya did a little bit of an exhibit with him. There's an opportunity to take photographs of his and have artists do their own take on them in a small mural collection around the downtown that also shows his birthplace, right? And now you have a cool walking tour that gets people around downtown that also talks about the history of Oshkosh, right? Louis Hine, for the most part, photographed children who were working as a protest to child labor laws. And he learned that because the very first labor protest in Wisconsin was a child labor protest in Oshkosh, right? I mean, that history, is deep here. And so there are ways to talk about that and celebrate that acknowledge what has existed here. I mean, they named the Sawdust District because this was Sawdust City, right? That's the old timber area of town. And that's, I would love, one of the things we've talked about is, could we do art using reclaimed lumber? Could we integrate some of that storytelling about the timber industry in town in the art we do, but in a way that's creative and vibrant and forward thinking, right? I think, to me, the best change has to also respect the past enough to integrate the parts of the past that were the best. And there are so many cool things about Oshkosh and the way the people show up. And, what is it? 70% of people stay here, right? Oshkosh is it's been highlighted in the New York Times as one of the communities that people don't leave, right? And some people kind of make fun of that as there's a closed-mindedness or whatever to that. I see that as people like living here. People want to stay here. People put down roots here, and those roots stay strong. That is not always, there are ways to view that as a really proud accomplishment. That when I was teaching in Chicago, that's one of the things that shocked me is every kid I taught wanted to live in Chicago. They were raised to have so much pride in the city of Chicago that they would be I might go off to college, but I'm definitely coming back to Chicago. Chicago is the only city I will ever make my life in. It's such a cool place. I was I grew up in Stevens Point. I was told, as soon as you can get out of this town, you should. It was such a different educational experience. I was not taught to have pride in my community. I was not taught to go back. I was taught to view going back as failure. And so to integrate some of that, to create a sense of pride in the people who do want to invest in and stay in and grow something special here, I think that's something we can do. And I think that is something that, the locals that have been here for a long time would love. Again, there are other things, some of that, sometimes you just have to be willing to do the work to know that over time people will like it. I think there are a lot of things around where the funding comes from that are worth exploring too. I think I like challenging donors and the community to raise funds for a lot of these projects, because I don't, while I do like public investment in art and infrastructure, I think there is something to be said about taxpayer dollars going to this work as opposed to philanthropic dollars or other dollars we can secure to do the work. So, and I think that can build some buy-in too. At the end of the day, every community is changing at all times. There is no way to avoid change, right? Like, winter's coming. It's always coming, right? Summer will come after that. Like, we live in seasons, and that seasonality is always going to be playing a role. The question to ask is the change good for Oshkosh, or is that change bad? And I think that's the more important thing. Like you're not resisting change. You're changing the community in a different direction. And that oftentimes isn't like, that is the biggest challenge most communities face, that are communities that are resistant to change, is they change in the wrong direction, and it becomes almost impossible to live a contemporary life in that community, right? You can't hold on so tightly to something that was great in a past era that you're not willing to let the current era have those great moments too, right? And so respect for the past for sure, like a really good job of listening to what the culture is here that people value, making sure that's integrated deeply into the program. But change is coming, change is happening. Do we want that change to lead to a vibrant and prosperous future for Oshkosh, or do we want that change to go the other direction?
Let's talk about that. All right. And we got a chance to kind of talk about this because that was part of the reason I think we were connected, and that is this. And I love what you're saying about one aspect and incorporating the historical aspects and the pride of Oshkosh in there. But the face of Oshkosh is changing. Mm-hmm. They're looking different.
Yeah.
We got different folks here. We got different folks here professionally, different folks here raising families. Oshkosh isn't changing. It has changed.
Yeah.
How does that get incorporated?
So there's I think I shared this with you the first time we talked, but there's a pair of statistics that I encourage every community to look at, especially when it's trying to understand who's in their community, because people tend to look at census tract data or census data when they're looking at the racial makeup or the ethnic makeup of their community. And while that is a statistic that is real, what that statistic doesn't really integrate is age and generational change, right? And so I think it's important to pair that statistic with your school age population, because your school age population will give you a much better sense of who your community is going to be, who it already is for the youngest generation in your community, and who it is going to be in 10, 20 years, right? And in most Wisconsin cities, this is true across most Wisconsin cities, it looks like 85 to 90% white when you look at the census data, and it looks 30 to 40% BIPOC when you look at school age data, right? So the number goes from 90% to 60% white when you look at that generational shift, right? And so as you're pointing out, if that's the school age data, the change has already happened, right? And what's really important then, in a community that I sincerely believe loves its kids, right? I believe Oshkosh wants its kids to have the opportunities. It's important to understand that who those kids are is not the same as who those kids were in the 70s or 80s or 90s when maybe some of the older guard here was having their students in school. And so you want every kid in this community to grow up seeing themselves in this community and seeing opportunity, right? The worst thing you want to do is put all this energy into raising and educating those children and having them feel like they have to get out because there isn't an opportunity for them as adults in this community, even though there were good opportunities for them as school children, right? And so there's a educational curriculum. When I was doing my multicultural education, I learned about this woman named Emily Stile. She has this windows and mirrors in education philosophy that is the curriculum should window give you the opportunity to look in on other cultures, and mirror reflect your own culture back to you for all students in your classroom, right? And I think that's such a great philosophy to take to public art in a community as well, right? Anybody who's living in your community should have a chance to learn about other cultures in the public art that's here, and should have a chance to see their culture reflected here. I get that it's like there may be one person of one background who's living here, and it may be hard to do it as soon as they move to town. I'm not setting that expectation that the second someone moves here, we throw a mural up with their culture, although I think that would be beautiful. But there are cultures that have historically been in Oshkosh now for a long time. I think about the Hmong culture specifically, that's now been in the U.S. since the 80s, that is integrated into these communities and is playing a vital role. Business owners,
I'd say
members.
Further than the 80s, probably the 70s.
I mean, I think
because we just celebrated in Appleton 50 years.
Okay, yeah.
50 years of the Hmong community integrating.
Yeah, and
so I'm assuming that's probably if they were in Appleton, they were in Oshkosh.
Yeah, and so again, but a community that's here, right?
Yes,
it's not
facts.
It's not. Are they staying at this point? They're here. They've been here. They're
here.
Adding such great value to the community. Like
yes.
where is the public art that celebrates the Hmong community here? There is public art that acknowledges the Menominee community. I don't know that there's been a great effort to work with the contemporary Menominee community to think about what public art could come next that talks less about the history of the Menominee and gives face and voice to Menominee people living today who are here, who are living contemporary lives in our communities. That's a cool opportunity, right? Thinking about the narrative of a future where Oshkosh is a great and thriving and supportive community for the Menominee tribe, and not just, acknowledging that there were people here before white settlers started coming to town, right? There's a Black community in town. There has been for a long time here now, right? There's such opportunity there too. And so, and again, like what's cool about starting to talk about public art as a collection as opposed to public art. And I think this is where that change resistance can come from sometimes too, is that like the very first investment feels like the only investment that might happen. And so there's so much weight on getting that investment right. When you start to say, we're committed to, over the next handful of years, doing a lot of murals and doing a lot of sculptures and doing a lot of public art, now, like, it doesn't have to be the story of Oshkosh in every single one of those projects. It can be, like I was saying before, you can start to say there are lots of pathways to tell lots of stories. And our goal over time is to try to tell as many of those stories so that students living in this community see themselves on the walls and the public art in town, but also see other students in the walls and art in town, right? And it starts to say, like, we want everyone here to feel home here and to feel a sense of belonging here, to feel a sense of ownership here. We want you to come up with your own business ideas. And where that ends up relating to businesses too is like, the largest population that grows new businesses tends to be immigrant populations in a community, right? Because they come to the community and there are things that are missing for their day-to-day needs, right? Like the grocery store that they're used to is different from the grocery store that, that the historical community here has gone to. And so, so suddenly you need somebody to sell some different products there. They're restaurants open, a lot of times we think about it in food spaces, but it also can be in all sorts of spaces where just a different lens and a different perspective offers an opportunity for a new business to launch, right? And so again, like, that's happening, right? There are plenty of students from all backgrounds that went to the Oshkosh schools that are starting businesses places. The question is, are they starting that business here? And that's always, I, again, grew up in Stevens Point. I know a lot of the Hmong community, when it graduated from high school, moved to the Twin Cities. There's a James Beard Award winning pastry chef in the Twin Cities that is from Junction City, Wisconsin, which is a small town outside of Stevens Point, right? Of course she went to the Twin Cities. Like, the opportunity for her to succeed as a Hmong community member were much greater for her in Minneapolis than they were going to be for her in Stevens Point or Junction City. But what a loss for Stevens Point that She didn't open that pastry restaurant there, right? And she comes back and she does stuff, and she's an amazing human who's doing great stuff still. But it is, that's the piece of the puzzle we want to talk about. Like, you don't want to give up your most creative, your most innovative people, regardless of their background. You don't want to give them up to other communities. And if people get more support, or if they feel more celebrated other places, and they have the capacity that innovators and creatives have, why wouldn't they leave?
Facts. You went hard. Greg, you went hard.
It's true.
Nah, hey, look.
but this is what I was saying before, though. Like, to me, this isn't hard. To me, this isn't left or right.
Well, it's not. This is community.
Every Republican in my life, which I have a lot of them, wants the best for all kids, right? There are fringe factions out there that, I mean, I know white supremacy exists. I know hate is real. I know evil is real. I do not believe that the majority of people who voted for Trump voted for him for that reason. And so, like, what is real is that a lot of those Republicans I've talked to have been led to believe they should be afraid of this type of work. And, and when I get a chance to sit down and talk with them and say, like, just hear me out as somebody doing this work, right? As somebody and love who is doing this work, I'm doing it because I want the best future for the communities I work with, and because I want every student to feel, every young person to feel a path. Not every young person. I want every person at every age to feel a path to success and contribution and ownership in their community. I've never gotten any pushback on that, you know? Like,
and I agree with you 100%. At the end of the day, I've not met many people who truly want harm for others.
Yeah.
So that's not it. From my interactions, that's never been it.
And the hard work is that we live in a really simplified media environment where local media doesn't really exist anymore, and we're fed the same narratives that are narratives that are designed to keep us in the same economic lane we've been in.
Well, they're not narratives meant for our local communities.
No.
We're caught up in a larger than life federal-ish news, and that stuff. Like, we really need to work at what's going on our block. And
that is, like I said, that is the heart. Like, to me, we talk about local art, we talk about local businesses, but it's also local storytelling, right? Like, that there's power in reclaiming local storytelling and telling the story of Oshkosh, and not telling the story of two political parties filtering their power structure onto Oshkosh, right? And so, it doesn't mean that there aren't relevant things in both of those narratives that Oshkosh should think through. But you can't let some think tanks in D.C. on either side of the aisle tell you what Oshkosh is and stop believing your day-to-day real-world experience with your neighbors, right? Like, that is, like I said, there are times when I'm afraid as a gay man living in a small town that something bad could happen to me. I'm not worried about that from anyone I've met in Princeton. Everyone I've met in Princeton is so loving and warm to me and Matt. I'm worried about somebody listening to a national narrative, looking for an outlet for that, and finding me and Matt without knowing us. That's the only person that's going to do harm to us.
Well, what you have just talked about is a large part of the goal of this very simple podcast known as the Kosh. A local, super local, talking to our local people, or our local difference makers and stakeholders, which is everyone. It's not about stature. It's not about the job you have. It's not about any of those things.
Yeah.
But it is about your experiences being here, and us taking down our silos and getting to know your neighbors and realizing we're good people. We care about each other. We try to do good things.
Yeah. And there's opportunity to do that work right now.
Facts.
So let's do it together.
Ooh. Okay. Before we wrap this topic up, or this segment up, my last question to you is this: is there any last things that you would like to say to the Kosh listeners about this topic?
I guess the big thing is an invitation, right? So, I think I'm going to make this invitation in two chunks. Like, anybody listening, we are looking for project ideas. We're looking for culture shifts you want to see happen. Like, there's an opportunity for this work to be informed by anybody. I would also, though, say there is an opportunity for us to start doing projects that shift the face of Oshkosh. That it's not even shift it, right? It's like more accurately represent the existing face of Oshkosh. And to me, especially as a white man, like, it is important for those projects to be identified and developed by actual people living in Oshkosh with that community experience. I'm not the right person to come up with that idea. I am the right person to advocate for and find resources for that idea. And so if you are listening to this and saying like, oh, it would be cool if we had Hmong art in the community, or it would be cool if we like told the Menominee story here differently than we do. Like if you're listening to this and you have thoughts in those regards, definitely reach out, share your ideas, like help me understand what you see as the best future for this work, for your community in Oshkosh. And I will do everything I can to try to get that done.
All right. Well, Greg, thank you. All right, Kosh listeners, you know what that means? That means we're going to start wrapping up this episode. So, you already know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for caring about this community. Thank you for supporting another individual out here running around in the Kosh and the Fox cities, making a difference, making us better, ripping down silos, helping us become stronger, better, cooler, all the things. Seriously. I'm so excited about this particular project. I am glad that I got to be part of the conversation and give my input. I hope you decide to too. But now on to the Kosh itself. You already know we are a work in progress because we are the People's Podcast. So what that means is I need your help to become the #1 podcast in all of Wisconsin. And how do we do that? Well, as you listen, if you come up with segments you think we should do, let us know. If you got questions we should ask, let us know. If you'd like to be a guest, let us know. If you'd like to recommend a guest, let us know. And you can reach out to us at askthekosh@gmail.com. Once again, that is askthekosh@gmail.com. You can also give us a call at 920-385-5073. All right. And then one more thing. We think we got something pretty special going on here at the Kosh. So the more community members that get to learn about this cool podcast called the Kosh, I think it helps bond us, learn about each other, get us out of our silos, learn about these talented individuals living here. I need you to help these analytics. And what that means is this: as you are listening, if there's a subscribe button, press it. If there are stars for you to give us a ranking, give us 5 stars. And if there's an opportunity for you to leave us a review, do that too. I need all of it from all of y'all. And that there helps our analytics, which helps us get in front of more eyes and ears out here in the community. Now, it's time for the real work. The real work. And you know what that is. It's shout out time. What do you got for shout outs?
I mean, I gave a bunch of shout outs already in the talk, but I want to shout out Amy Albright one more time. I just think that Discover Oshkosh isn't just doing this work and like having me come for strategy. They're talking about shifting resources to support it. You all know that like it's one thing to pay lip service to the work or do strategy work. If you're not actually shifting resources, little happens from it. So I just think that she is really committed to seeing Oshkosh in its best light and supporting that. And I want to give a huge shout out to her and Discover Oshkosh for taking the time.
That was it.
How many do you want me to do?
You can do as many as you want. Just the Kosh. You can shout out and shout out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm good.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, love it. All right. My shout outs for this week. I want to give a special shout out to the Dr. Martin Luther King Day Celebration Committee in Appleton. We put on a fire production, and A, it was a packed house, and B, the production just came out superb. So I want to thank the community for showing up. I want to thank those planners. I'm on that planning committee, and I want to thank the talented individuals and our students from the I'm going to slaughter the name, so I'm not even going to say the name. Amalade Academy in Appleton. Oh my God, these little kids sang. You know how kids sit on stage and they pretend like they sing? No, these kids sang. They put it down. Yes, they were fire. So just an appreciation overall for the event as a whole, and as we have gotten the different reviews from community members, they're just like, this is the best one we've had in a really, really long time. So I'm proud to be associated with that. I just want to send a shout out to all our local government individuals who right now, as there is tons of federal change happening at the speed of light, the amount of confusion that is happening and fear in some cases, the individuals that got to take those phone calls and try to communicate the things that needed to be communicated over things that they did not create nor decide. I just want to say thank you for the work you do at the local government level, because that's who you can call. That's who you choose to call. That's who you can call, even though they weren't the ones to make these decisions. So big shout out to them, because I know they are working hard right now. All right. And I'm going to keep my shout out short this week. I want to send a shout out to all those community members who've been reaching out and being very caring and very empathetic of all the things that are happening right now with different segments in our community. Look, we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. Thank you for your caring. Keep doing that. We're, at the end of the day, just remember, we're all neighbors. We're not that different. Sometimes we're just not different at all. So keep that in mind as you go out here and interact with the individuals that you see in your community. And then last, never least, I want to send a very special shout out to my wife, who continues to let us make this podcast in the house. We love you, baby. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now, we've got one last thing to do here, Greg. You know what that is?
Parting words.
That's right. So you got choices.
Okay.
All right. The choices are this. We do an A, B, and a C. So option A, you get to bless the Kosh listeners with some parting words of wisdom. Option B, you can share with the Kosh listeners, what would 13-year-old you, what would yourself today tell 13-year-old you? Option C, which any good multiple choice has all of the above. So you can do both. What's your choice?
I'm going to go with B today.
Okay.
Just because this is a different topic that we could do a full podcast on at some point. But as I mentioned, I've gone through some significant life changes. I was a teacher and I'm doing very different work now. I was straight for a long time and now I'm gay, although there's, whatever. That's an evolution that is not necessarily as concrete as the labels make you say out loud. But, I've worked a lot with students. And one of the things that I wish schools were better at saying to people in general, but that I wish somebody had said to me when I was 13 is like, there's a lot of fun in not knowing where you're going. And that this idea of like deciding on a future at a young age and following a career path is a myth. Like, it works for some people. Don't get me wrong. There are people who know they want to be doctors at the age of 2 and line up their life to go to med school and become doctors and stay doctors and, retire as doctors. And, good for them. It's a life I don't understand, but good for them that's real. But I don't think people talk enough about how much fun it can be to bounce around from identity to identity and slowly but surely piece those identities together into a full human. And so much of my best life has come from jumps that have felt way different from where I was into something completely new. Like I mentioned, I washed a ton of dishes right now for a restaurant, and that was not on my professional goal card. And it's so much fun every time I do it. I take so much pride in catching the kitchen up on all the dishes every time I get a chance to do it. And if you had told that to high school Greg, that he would find satisfaction in washing dishes for a local restaurant as part of his professional life, he would have laughed at you very hard. And so I just think it is what I would tell to 13-year-old me is take a deep breath, evaluate your opportunities in real time, say yes to the one that's the most exciting to you in that moment, ride it for as long as the wave makes sense, and then when it stops making sense, take a deep breath evaluate your opportunities and say yes to the new one that makes even more sense. And over time, stuff will start coming together in ways that are really, really amazing. And you won't believe how stuff teacher Greg will suddenly show up in a podcast 13 years later, and it will all be great. So to anyone listening out there feeling the pressure to know what your future looks like, take a deep breath, decide what makes the most sense for you now, and don't worry too much if it's not a long-term decision. You'll find some new path in the future.
Facts. All right, Greg, what you think?
This was fun. I'm ready to come back next week.
Hey, the Kosh.